Hi, and welcome to the Mindset and Performance Podcast. I'm Dries. I help athletes and business professionals with their career development. We work on a wide range of areas from psychology to strategy and execution, but we focus essentially on the mindset as it is the key to everything else. The whole idea behind this podcast is to deconstruct the habits that led people to their success, to learn from their experience and understand the psychology behind their actions and behaviors. And of course, to gain key insights that you can apply to your own life. Welcome to the Confinement series. These episodes are recorded for you from Germany in times where all the nations have taken strict measures to stop spreading the coronavirus. With this new and unique situation, many of us are challenged to live in conditions that they are not used to, which is why I'm bringing experts in different fields to give advice and intel on how you can manage your everyday, your health, physically and mentally, your relationships, your business, and your emotional well-being. So, without further ado, our next guest. How about starting with introducing yourself a little bit? What is it specifically that you do? And
So I am a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher, and mostly what I teach is in Yin Yoga, and
that's how I get to know you. But I think a lot have evolved since then, right? Like 5-6 years ago when we met the first time.
Yes. And I discovered Yin Yoga because I went through quite extreme adrenal fatigue, where I basically burnt myself out. And I was traveling and teaching yoga and surfing a lot and working out a lot and building 2 small businesses and just doing everything yang. If you think of the term of yin being going in, slowing down, cooling, calming, and yang being external, expressive, fast. I was doing everything on one side of the spectrum, and I eventually ended up burnt out. I actually ended up collapsing at my friend's wedding and ended up in hospital, and then was a vegetable. And the universe, or my body, or whatever you want to call it, forced me into yin, into stillness and into calmness. And that was really the first time I started to understand the concept of yin, and then further the practice of yin. So that really helped me with my not only with my recovery, but my looking at my relationship with the difference between yin and yang. And then as I started teaching it, I moved to Bali, and I started teaching it and studying it more and more. And then now I have a retreat company with my business partner, and we have a Yin Yoga teacher training. And I've noticed that I've been teaching it more and more because it's the best way I can see, the best way that I can serve people. We're getting so many people through our retreats, through our private classes, through my studio classes when I used to live in Australia, who are so burnt out, who are so wired but tired, who don't even realize where they're at. They just know something's not working. They're not quite thriving. They haven't got the energy they used to or that they want to have. They're having such busy and fast minds. They're feeling anxious when they're not ticking off to-do list. They're working out instead of resting. And the best way I feel I can serve people is just to help open the door to help people see, first and foremost, that there is another way. And then secondly, what this constant go, go, go is doing to their bodies physically and doing to their mental health. And to help them connect to a practice that brings them back to balance. Because eventually, as with the law of the universe, and because the universe that we see outside of us is reflected in the universe inside of us, so outside and inside, the pendulum will eventually swing the other way. And how far you push onto one side of the spectrum determines how far it has to swing the other way before it starts steadily coming back to balance. So yeah, now I have, with my business partner Rachel, we have a retreat company, the Pineapple House Bali. So that's something something that Rachel started 5 years ago, and I came on board a year ago. We have our Yin Yoga teacher training, and we just help in whatever way I can to help people to come back to a place of balance so they can fully thrive, have the energy that they want to have, be able to explore those inner messages to help them guide them to their dharmic path, their life purpose, and to have the tools when they start recognizing that they go out of balance, which inevitably will happen. And it's not about doing things that just have a little bit of yang and a little bit of yin and just staying in the grays. It's about having a healthy balance and knowing how to swing gently from one side to yin to yang, to yin to yang, without staying on one side so far, so long that we start having repercussions in our bodies and in our minds.
So from what I understand, you teach and you offer those retreats in a structured way, not just like giving classes, but like purposeful and meaningful ways for specific objectives to help these people not only cool down and then go back to whatever they've been doing, but also adopt that learning as a lifestyle and keep on applying and keep on practicing back home.
Exactly,
right?
and to offer people tools so they really understand knowledge and tools. They really understand what's going on, and to encourage the compassion that they have for themselves to have the courage to come back to stillness, because a lot of the time it's it can feel quite like a scary place, and just to have the courage that coming back to stillness is not as scary as sometimes we can feel it is. Slowing down, not doing things on your to-do list, not being everything for everyone, not always ticking off the perfectionist list, actually gives you greater freedom.
And how was your journey so far, like doing all of that, all of this teaching? Not necessarily only the last year with Rachel, but since you made the shift, since you made the transition to what you're doing right now.
Well, originally I was a professional dancer, so that was very, very yang, always doing. And then when I realized that I wanted to surf more, and that being a dancer I wasn't able to choose when I surfed, and then choosing the path of teaching yoga to surfers.
What kind of dancer?
I was a contemporary dancer, so everything from opera to music videos, just the whole spectrum.
Right. Wow. Didn't know about that.
You didn't? Oh, well, there you go. And
no, I just knew about the surfing.
Yeah. Now I just surf on the waves. So I trained and then went straight into that profession. And contemporary dance, you are required to be an athlete, but we were not really taught how to rest. And as any top athlete knows, you have to have rest in order for your body to repair and restore, and we just weren't taught that. It's such a huge gap within the profession, and nutrition. We were pushed so far in our training, but I don't really remember learning about rest or nutrition, and that's crazy now, knowing what I know now. And you're paid so badly that you don't really have a choice to stop and rest in between jobs. You have to take part-time jobs in between auditions or in between working for a company. So I just did not stop. And we all know that a dancer's career is often quite short, but I realize now that it doesn't have to be that short if we're taught how to pace ourselves, and we're just not. So we end up just getting injured or burnt out. But for me, I didn't stop because of injury. I stopped because I knew I wanted to surf. And most of the jobs are in cities that are away from the sea. And again, because we weren't paid that well, it's not like you can take large chunks of time off and go and surf. And that message just became louder and louder to me. So eventually I listened and just decided to take the plunge, and trained to be a yoga teacher so I could teach surfers. And as soon as I started that journey, I was so lucky. I didn't really have to look for work. It kind of just came to me. And I lived in
And how was that journey specifically?
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt that journey.
yeah. So,
Ups and downs, just ups, just downs.
oh, like a whole roller coaster. I went from, yeah, my first job was teaching in France at a surf camp, and I was working for free, which I knew at the time was a really bad job idea.
Mm,
But I also knew I had my eye and my mind set on this job at a surf and yoga retreat company in India. I knew
mm,
about this job before I was even yoga teacher. I just knew that I was meant to be the yoga teacher on this retreat. And so when this job came up to work, and it was just to teach in France, and it was just after my training, and I was just like, well, this is a really good opportunity for me to get loads of practice because I know I'm going to get this job in India. Um, and sure enough, I was offered the job, and I had already halfway through my time in France. It was nice confirmation when it did came through. I was like, oh, phew, my gut feeling was right, and went straight from that to living in India. And I was doing everything yang again. I was living in a hot place, eating spicy food, surfing, working out, teaching. I was teaching only vinyasa then, so quite a heating practice. I had a surfboard bag brand that I'd started a year before that. I had a class in London that I was continuing to run called Yoga for City Surfers. And I just was confused as to why I was tired. And then the company flew me to Sri Lanka after I think 4 or 5 months and to work there. And we were doing back-to-back retreats. And I was surf guiding, running the villa staff, teaching the yoga class, and hosting the whole retreat. And I worked from 5:30 in the morning till 9 at night with about half an hour break. And after a month of that, I started to notice some real signs that I was heading towards something. I mean, this is what when I look back, I can see that now. At the time, I didn't really know what was going on. My periods had stopped for about 6 months, which should have been a real red flag for me, but I just felt it was convenient because I was in and out of the water all the time. I started noticing that my skin started to really ache, and I had tingling on my skin, and my hair started to fall out. And then I got infections on my feet, which got into my blood, which is a very specific tropical infection. And usually people with strong immune systems shouldn't be affected by this. So I finished my time, that stint of work, and I went back to Europe for a little bit, and I went back on crutches. I was asked to teach in Dubai on the way home. And in Dubai, all these different scars and cuts in my body started opening up into this really horrible infection. So I kind of hobbled home on crutches. I had to actually be in a wheelchair in the airport. And I got home, and I remember seeing in India, I remember seeing my Ayurvedic consultant, who said to me I was heading for a crash. And I was like, oh, I'll be fine. I'm going to go home and rest at home for a bit. I'll be fine. And then just carried on. And then I got home and I saw our family traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, who, after seeing me, looked at me and he said, Lucy, this is what I'm prescribing. He's like, I need you to eat slowly, talk slowly. And I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. And a week after that session, he was like, you're heading for a crash. A week after that session, I was in hospital. And then I was a vegetable for about 2 months. I would go from lying in bed to lying on my mum's kitchen sofa. I would cry when I tried to choose what herbal tea I would drink. The choices would just be overwhelming. And my body had just swung me. My whole adrenal system had collapsed. And I had a very, very clear message smacked in my face that I needed to slow down.
What helped you navigate through that period?
Yeah,
What helped you?
I had
Your training?
I had to accept and let go. I had to let go of everything. I had to let go of what my career ahead of me might or might not look like, even though I had this great year of, everything kind of folding for me. And I had to let go of any time span of when I might or might not get better. And I had to let go of any goals I had fitness-wise. I had to let go of everything. And I had to learn to accept. And I had to have compassion for myself. On my journey, when I started feeling better, I would have days where my energy would come back, and then the next day it would just crash down, and I had to just give up any idea of what I might do and just lie in bed and be still.
What's the difference between letting go and giving up?
That's a really good question. Letting go has, for me, had a sense of truly honoring where I was at and letting go of the ideas that my ego had created, of my mind had created, and I then had put importance on those thoughts. And for me, I
Like a sort of accepting what
totally,
it is.
yeah, completely, and accepting where I was from a place of compassion. And a giving up would have a sense of hopelessness, but acceptance had a sense of deeper inner knowing. It's nothing to do with what my ego wants or what the stories I've made up of who I wanted to be, and acceptance of where I was. And that took a lot of courage, because when we're on a roll with something, or when we have these grand plans, we attach so much importance and sense of ourselves to those plans. It can feel quite scary to let go of that and just be. And there's so much fear that bubbles up with that. I've now, since then learned about traditional Chinese medicine as part of my study into Yin Yoga, and there are 5 elements, and one of the elements, water, is to do with winter, and this is the sense of going down, and this is the element that I was forced into through adrenal fatigue, and it's associated with the kidneys, and the kidneys is where you store your Jing, and your Jing is your energy, that your finite amount of energy that you're born with. And when you dip into that Jing, then you start to really affect your overall health, but also eventually it shortens your life. And the idea is that you live off your acquired qi through good rest, good healthy exercise, good food. And what's so interesting is that coming into that stillness and coming into that rest, deep rest, the emotion that's associated with the water element is fear. And I really recognize that it's this fear of the unknown, fear of the depth that you're going into, fear of the not just constantly doing. And what the water element asks you to do is to have courage even in that face of fear, even if you can't necessarily put a name to it, or be able to describe it, but still it has this deep fear. And often that fear is so scary that we just cover it up. We just keep going, and keep doing, because the more you do, it distracts you from this, what feels like a really scary place. And I had to get to know that water element. And when I learned the 5 element system later on, I remember just learning about water element and just my eyes just filling up with tears, and then just burst into tears, because it just hit home. I was like, that's exactly my experience. And that's what I see now a lot of the time with the students and the guests that we have coming through our business and through my private classes, and is that fear of stopping. And society rewards doing, it rewards activity, it rewards productivity,
Being proactive and productive and so
yeah,
on. But I think what you're saying right now, there's a lot of lessons for the actual situation with the corona.
yes,
We are
absolutely,
forced now to slow down.
totally. And we are in an enforced water period. We're in a period of time that we don't know how long it's going to be, where we are forced to slow down, and that can bring up a lot of fear for people. And in this cycle, the 5 element cycle, the element that comes before it is metal, and this is associated with autumn. And this is letting go and grief. And we're forced to let go of so much right now. Let go of our sense of freedom, let go of our plans for the future, let go of money, let go of our jobs for some people. And all these emotions have to be heard and not covered up, because then we stay in flow with this natural cycle. So we really are asked to let go. And to the other emotion that's associated with the metal element is grief. And that can often be grieving the plans we had. It can be grieving the sense of freedom that we had, grieving the idea and the person that we thought we could be or that we are, and coming to acceptance of exactly where we are right now, which is coming to that illness, going in. And the positive part about the water element is this is where it asks you to recognize your purpose in life. It asks you to recognize your deep soul and your will, and ask you to come back to those messages that might not have ever had the chance, or certainly recently haven't had the chance to be heard, because we're constantly doing, and we can't listen to those deeper messages when we're constantly being active and covering up. And in Indian tradition, we think of the mind as being a lake, which I'm sure you've heard this analogy. And the lake, as we look deep down to the bottom, sometimes the stuff down there is not always nice, but it's also when we are able to look down and we're able to process these things and let them come to the surface. But if it can feel really scary to look down, so instead we keep the surface of the lake super busy, and then we just keep it busy, and it can't look down anyway, so we just keep doing. So the water element that we've been forced to go into now is a great opportunity for us to look down, to look in, and to really start to recognize those little inner messages that now have a great opportunity to be heard. And what it's
Right.
asking you is
And
to
it's,
have courage.
yeah, and it can be quite challenging now for people to slow down and relax, reflect, yet in the same time dealing with the idea of accepting instead of giving up.
Yes.
And what other challenges do you think, maybe in a personal level for you first, and then the other people, what do you think it's challenging for them to do during this time?
Well, we've all been asked to look at our relationships with those that we live with, or those maybe we're on our own. But for people who are now living in much closer quarters to their housemates, to their spouses, to their loved ones, to whoever they are living with, sometimes we can ignore things that are going on, or we can kind of live in a certain rhythm because we have time to take space and go out, or we go to work, and now we are having to look at those things that maybe have been bubbling under the surface. And one of the main things is just learning how to really clearly and calmly communicate in a way that is both loving and compassionate, but also sets really clear, loving boundaries for yourself, so that you can have a flow between you and the people that you're living with that holds respect for one another, that allows the other person to be fully heard, but also for your boundaries to be held. And I think that's an amazing opportunity to learn those skills, because when I started learning them, they not only changed my intimate relationships, but changed the way I communicate to my friends, to the people I work with. And we've all got amazing
I see.
opportunity to learn that now.
Are we talking here about nonviolent communication techniques, the NVC, or is it a different technique?
Yes, it's part of nonviolent communication. The style of communication that I learnt and had to really put into practice is called reflective listening. And I learned this when I was having couple counseling with my ex-partner, with a psychotherapist, and it just blew our minds away. And it diffused a whole load of scenarios that could have blown up, but really it taught me as an individual how to truly listen to someone else, but also to truly listen to myself. Because a lot of the time when we're speaking with someone, we're actually not listening to what they're saying. We are trying to work out how to respond. And we try to work out how to respond often in the way that makes us come out looking the best we can, because we don't want to lose face, or we don't want to look stupid, or we've been annoyed at what that person says, and so we want to make sure that they know that we're annoyed. So the other person isn't feeling heard. And also we're then reacting based on thoughts in our own mind rather than the actual situation. And reflecting and listening allows you to have the tools to fully listen to the other person, while having the space to respond from a true place in yourself rather than reacting. And then also allows you both to set out boundaries that are really clear and loving and compassionate. But it means that, particularly for those people pleasers out there, you're not trying to constantly buffer someone else's pain, or you're not trying to diffuse situations or try and agree with someone just because it makes it easier. You're actually having the courage to lay out really strong and healthy boundaries.
Yeah, I can imagine that could be very challenging, but at the same time, very interesting skill to learn.
Mm.
I have been in touch, of course, with friends that are confined and in quarantine. Sorry, back in Morocco or other parts of the world, and I mean, they joke about it a little bit, but there's some truth in it. Like they are locked with their spouses or partners, and for the first time, 24/24.
Yes.
I mean, it's not something that they used to have, and they're like, well.
Yeah, and then all those things that may have just been simmering or you've been able to avoid because you can just escape from the house, it's suddenly waiting for you at
Yeah.
home. And I've always said this: if you want to do deep work on yourself, if you want to truly understand yourself and to put into practice the skills that will transform your life, it's right there at home in front of the person you love the most. They are your biggest
Mm.
mirrors, they are your greatest teachers. And if you choose to accept the challenge, they will help you to grow the most. And that is certainly true for my relationship with my ex-partner. We visited some dark places, and I feel really honored that we were both willing to grow from those places. And as a result, we are both better people on the other side of it. But we had to step up for ourselves. We had to own our own stuff, and we had to have compassion for the other person. And it could be so easy to stay in victim mode or blame mode, rather than dropping those stories and coming back to truth. And for me,
Mhm.
reflective listening really helped me to give me the tools and the guidance of how to keep coming back to myself rather than the stories I was telling myself.
So how does it work practically? How
Yeah.
does reflective listening works?
So basically, let's have a scenario. So let's say this is one that's coming up quite a lot for different people I've heard of. Um, let's say someone, it can be the person you're living with, but maybe it's when you're at work a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever you're allowed to be at work. Let's say somebody has a really is constantly talking about something negative about this whole situation with coronavirus, and let's say you're someone that doesn't want to hear the negative stuff. So reflective listening is a way of communicating in places, in times that are challenging, where you basically reflect back when someone's speaking. You reflect back exactly what you hear without any interpretation from your part. So let's say
Like when you say reflect, like
you
repeat
just
back,
repeat back.
or
Yes,
just
exactly. So like, let's say Sally Ann, imagine you, Sally Ann, is at work, or maybe Sally Ann is your girlfriend at home or whatever, and she is constantly talking about all the negative things that are happening, and how it's all doom and gloom, and let's say at the time you're really trying to stay positive because you realize that negative thinking is not serving you. So often what happens is, when Sally Ann starts talking about all these negative things, often people will start to say to Sally Ann, well, can't you think about it in this way? Well, look at the positive side, or start to offer different ways of thinking. Actually, what this is problem solving. The problem, you think, is that Sally Ann has a negative mindset, and the way of
Mhm.
solving it is by you offering different ways of them thinking, Sally Ann thinking in a different way. And Sally Ann is going to feel really frustrated that she's not being heard because, you know, it might be underlining all of this. She's just really, really fearful. But on the flip side as well, if you are constantly in front of Sally Ann, you know it's not serving you to constantly be bombarded with this negativity. So reflective listening might look something like this. Sally Ann goes on about all the negative things that she's hearing in the news. And you might repeat back something along the lines, and of course it's totally repeating what you hear, no interpretation of your own. You say, wow, it sounds like...
So that confirms that you're listening.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so they know that you're listening. So you say, wow, it sounds like there's a lot of news that you've been taking in today. So it could be as simple as that. Like, there's a lot of news, and this news is really looking at how coronavirus is negatively affecting, you know, the universe or the world or whatever it is. And the Sally Ann may then also carry on talking about it, and you can say, yeah, it sounds like this is really affecting the way that you're experiencing this. I can really hear right now that that talking to someone can be really helpful. I really want to give you that time. Right now, I'm feeling a lot myself about this whole situation with coronavirus, and I'm going to need to take some time out. But how about you give so-and-so a call, because I know that that's often really helpful for you. Or you can say, how about we talk about this at 6 o'clock once I finish doing my work at home. So you make sure that they know that you're hearing them, and then you offer up really loving, compassionate boundaries. So the alternative of that could be like, hey, can you just stop talking about that, please? Or you're always just looking at the negative. Why can't you just look at the positive? Or like, God, I've got to do some work right now. This is not the time. So what you're actually doing is you're not responding for what you hear. You're responding to your reactions inside. So it's not coming from a place of truth. And Sally Ann is then feeling more fearful and not feeling heard. So it allows the other person to be fully heard. But the key thing to remember is that reflective listening is not agreeing with the other person. It's just letting them know that they've heard their pain or their concern or whatever it is. You don't have to say, yeah, I know, yeah, it's really bad, isn't it? Hey, can we talk about this another time? Because that might not be your reality. Your reality is that actually you see some positive things about what's happening at the moment for yourself, not positive with what's happening on a global scale. But finally I've got the time to really be, or finally I've got the time to do that course I've wanted to do, or I can really see how it's positive for the planet that there's not many planes. Your reality is different. So it's not about enforcing your reality onto someone else, and it's not about agreeing on someone else's reality. It's about repeating back what they say without any interpretation, so that they know they have been heard. And then in that space that you create, you're able to listen to your own response and reactions. And if you feel that you can't respond in a way that is not reactive, or you're not sure how you need to respond, you can say, yeah, I can really hear that that's affecting you right now. I do want to have this conversation, but I just need some time to process. Do you mind if I just take 10 minutes out? Or do you mind if we just revisit this later this evening or something? So you're giving yourself the time to commit to responding from a place that is true from your reality, rather than a react from a place of fear or anger or whatever emotion is the first one to reach you.
I see. So basically, first you gotta confirm and validate the fact that you're listening, just that the person see that you actually know what they're talking about, not necessarily going into reframing and tell them, or maybe it could be, again, not reframing it to positive, not telling them, I don't want to hear that anymore, you're too negative or something.
Yeah. And it's not, it just makes it, often we are responding or reacting so much around our own story, and it's really helping you to keep keep yourself in check as to what stories you're bringing to the conversation. So a story you could be bringing is like, you know, inside your head, you'd be like, God, Sally Ann is just always doing this to me. Why can't she see that I need the space? Why can't she see that I'm trying to think about this positively? And Sally Ann might not be doing this because of, you know, she's not doing it to make you have a bad experience. Sally Ann might be just really scared. And so it's just allowing the other person to know that they are fully heard, but that doesn't mean stepping over your own boundaries. You don't have to be a martyr for someone else's fears.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, that could be very, very helpful. It requires some practice, I guess.
Yes, it does. And
Mm.
with my ex-partner, we used to practice in therapy. And now I'm living with my housemate, my business partner, and this is something that I passed on with her and discuss a lot with her, and we've practiced together. And then also we've discussed, you know, like if there's a situation or something that we find challenging, you know, we talk about it with you know, if it's something that's happening outside of our home or business, when we, you know, we have a laugh. We are like, oh God, this is a really good opportunity to practice reflective listening, because it's often a challenge. You know, it's often you know, if we're reacting, it's from a place that doesn't feel great for us, or it's from a deep fear or a deep anger, or, you know, an old pattern or an old story. So anytime we visit those, it's going to be a challenge because they're deeply ingrained. And the commitment comes to continuing to dropping those stories and knowing those stories are not true. They are just coming from our patterns and conditioning. And to drop those
Right.
stories and then have the tools to be able to listen. Because sometimes we're like, well, that person shouldn't be heard because they've done X, Y, and Z to me. And it's all this kind of victim mode. This has happened to me. How dare they do that to me? And it's all me, me, me. And it's about dropping that story and seeing every single scenario for what it is, rather than piling it on top of the stories that were already learned.
How about taking space? How about taking space and requesting
Yeah,
space if you need the me time?
yeah, 100%. And
Mm,
it's really good to kind of practice with someone else or on your own, to just have a way of being able to exit a conversation lovingly and compassionately. Because you know, if we need space, sometimes we can get so kind of wound up in, like, you know, and then we just end up shouting and storming out, and that's not lovingly and compassionately taking space. So having a few little sentences up your sleeve can be really helpful. Like, I understand that this sounds like it's a real tough one for you. It is something that I want to, you know, listen. Right now I'm noticing that I'm feeling quite depleted and I need to build up my own reserves. Could we revisit this conversation later? Or you know, the other one is that you can reflective listen to someone. You know, let's say that you know, let's say that someone is angry with you because you know, they feel that you're not done your share of the cleaning around the house or whatever, and you feel that you have done your share. And so it's not you know, it's, they're expressing, you know, you should do this more, you should do that more, or look at that, I'm doing this again, or, you know, like, it could be passive aggressive or whatever it is. And you can stop and take a deep breath. That always helps. And then say, hey, I it feels like we need to have a discussion about the cleaning, because it's obviously something that's really bothering you. Do you mind if we do that at 4 p.m.? So it's just setting a time of, you know, this is what we're going to do. And then that person might not take the bait, you know, especially it does help if you talk about this with people that you live with, because then they start to also step up for themselves. But let's say they don't take the bait and they start going, well, it shouldn't be a discussion. Clearly you haven't done all the cleaning, or, you know, they start going on, and they're not communicating in a way that is loving or compassionate, and or it can be quite rude, or their tone can be quite harsh. And that's when you can also say, I understand that this is really bothering you, but it's not okay for you to speak to me like that. I'm happy to speak to you about this, but I'm not happy with you speaking to me if it's that tone that you're talking. And if they continue, you say, hey, I'm going to leave the room right now. I'm going to leave, and then let's come back at, so and so time. I can come back in 10 minutes, or when you want to have this conversation, let me know, and let's find a time. So reflective listening doesn't mean that you have to then be the punch bag if someone is going to continue to communicate in a way that feels threatening for you. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily say things that are threatening, but a tone or a way in which they are speaking can feel quite threatening. And so you can put up really healthy boundaries as well by saying, hey, this is obviously really bothering you, and I do want to resolve it, but I'm not going to do it while you speak to me in that tone. How about we take a 10-minute breath and then come back and talk about it later.
Right. I think listening also is not just listening to words, but listening and looking at body language,
Yeah.
at tone, at expressions, facial expressions, being able to read in these
Yeah.
also, like
And you have to be
mm,
genuine, when you listen to someone, when you think of someone who you feel is truly listening to you, you can picture that body language looks like. So they are facing you, they are giving you eye contact, and their tone is not passive aggressive or dismissive in any way. And so it's not hard to listen to someone fully when we are not coming at something with stories, and when we're coming to a conversation with love and compassion. And so in order to get to that place, we have to let go of stories, because if we hold on to them, they start just leaking into our tone. We start having a bit of a sharpness to our tone, or we start to start to alluding towards that it's their fault or whatever it is. You have to let go of all of that. So it can feel like a vulnerable place, because when we're not the victim, it can feel quite scary. Or when we let go of stories, we're in a place where we can create something new, which is great, but that can also feel quite scary. So to reflective listen, we really have to step up for ourselves, and that is only coming back to a deeper place of truth. It's even though when you start practicing it, it can feel awkward or scary or frustrating, but it is so worth sticking to.
mhm. What I like about how it is called reflective listening rather than nonviolent communications, because by the way, I'm very familiar with the nonviolent communication. I think the same principles are applied. It sounds very similar actually to nonviolent communication. What I like about it, the title of reflective listening, is there's the word reflect in it. Reflect as in reflect on yourself,
Yes.
reflect on the other person. Is being present, being attentive, being um, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's basically being there,
Being
listening,
aware.
really, in awareness,
Yeah.
yeah. And what are the which leads me to the next reflection or question on what skills do we need to develop? What's the core skill that we need to develop to be able to be aware? How can we become more aware?
Yeah.
And I think that lead us to mindfulness, meditation, uh, this kind of practices and training, even if we can call it that way, that help us get aware of our thoughts, our emotions
Yeah.
before they.
I
Yeah.
think the one thing we have to come to understand is that our thoughts are not truth. And
Mm,
they can be very convincing, particularly when they put you in a place that gets you out of something that feels sticky. Like being a victim, is the story that nothing's your fault, and that means you don't ever take responsibility for anything that you've done, or take
mm,
responsibility of something that's happened to you. And the first teachings of Buddhism, mindfulness, is that we are not our thoughts. The thoughts come and go, and therefore they are not your true nature, because your true nature is the one that is witnessing those thoughts coming, going. And it also is the true nature that was the same true nature when you were born, the same you, all the way up to this point in your life. And we get so caught up with the thoughts and with the stories that we believe them to be us. And then when we have to let go of them, we feel we are letting go of something, of a part of us, and that is an illusion. It's not truth. It's not your true self, and it certainly is not freedom, because then we are a victim to these thoughts as they come, they go, and they dictate the direction of your life. So we have to first and foremost understand that we are not our thoughts, even though they can tell a very convincing story. And to in those the hardest times to do that is when we are reacting, when we're feeling triggered, because not only do we have thoughts coming up, but also we have emotions, and triggers can often be associated with stuff that's happened, there's an ongoing story that's been going on since you were a child. And to let go of that as well means letting go of all those times in which you reacted from that trigger, rather than recognizing that you're reacting from a story that's not true. And so we have to come back to knowing that we are much purer, or much more encompassing. We are much more than just these limiting thoughts, um, and that no, in that witnesser that is witnessing all those thoughts cannot be affected by these emotions. But what happens is we completely lose the distance between the witnesser and the thoughts. We attach to them so strongly that then we completely believe that whatever they say is true, and then we are off on an emotional train where it takes us towards the victim story that we've been running, or the people pleasing story that we've been running, or the anger, or whatever it is. Fill in the gaps. Everyone's story is unique to them. So in those moments, so that's why it's the deepest, or one of the deepest um, opportunities for growth, because it's all very well and good understanding of stories from an intellectual level, but the growth comes from changing your behavior and changing your relationship with thoughts in that moment when you are triggered, not reacting from a trigger and then later on unpicking it, which is helpful. You know, my ex-partner and I did that a number of times in therapy, but you have to step up for yourself, even though the story might be so strong, even though you might feel upset, anxious, angry, shameful, like all the worst ones. Even in those moments, those are the moments that come back to looking at what is real. What is real is the fact that you're witnessing this happen. You are not these things that are happening. And that's when the growth comes, because you are down there in the dumps. That's what was so amazing about my relationship with my ex-partner, is that we did have moments when we were really dark, and we both were just like, well, we're down here now, we might as well shine a torch and clear it out and learn from it. But because it was dark, you had to have that courage of stepping up for yourself. And that doesn't mean fighting your way up. It actually means being okay, feeling vulnerable, and then acting from a place of truth and maturity. And the growth is just huge, because you're digging out those places that have often been left because we just keep ourselves busy. And now we're at a place where the world has been asked to go home. And what a great opportunity to really step into that
Front.
challenge and grow from it. We'll be better people on the other side if we accept it.
Yes, the challenge and the growth and the learning there. I was just going to ask you, what does it take to grow? And my thoughts are going towards the fact that challenging situations push us to grow,
Yeah,
getting out from the comfort of our life, comfort of our days, and the kind of challenge that we are confronted with now
yeah,
can help us grow. There's growth in it for sure.
yeah.
I was it was really nice, Lucy. Really, really nice having that conversation with you
And
here
you.
with so many nice, positive, good insights and intel here in this conversation. I'm sure people will benefit a lot from it.
Happy to share. I'm
Mm,
curious to
Where
see.
do people can find you to hear more from you and practice maybe with you?
Yeah. So the retreat company that Rachel and I have is the Pineapple House Bali. At the moment, we're focusing on a Facebook group that we've created called Whole Health with Rachel and Lucy, although it will be soon to be changed to the Whole Health Project with Rachel and Lucy. And that's where we are offering classes, meditations, talks, and lectures from us, and not only us, but our favorite and most valued practitioners around the world, particularly at this time when people do have time at home. We want to offer up a place where people can have access to the deeper teachings and learnings and practitioners. And it's a free group, and for those people who don't have anything, they can just add themselves to the group and see all the videos and lectures for free. And for those people who want to give back, they can give back directly to the practitioners. Rachel and I don't take a cut. So that's the main place that Rachel and I are, and I'm definitely putting most of my teachings and learnings on to offer to people. And then also we both have a Yin Yoga teacher training, and that's when we really dive into the teachings of Yin Yoga. And for those of you who haven't done it before, it means when you hold passive stretches for a number of minutes to access the fascia and the meridians in the body. And so that's when we really dive deep, and we have a whole week, which is an incredible journey.
Yeah, I'll take all the links from you.
Yeah,
And Instagram, I guess, also your profile, Pineapple House profile, and maybe even and also the link of the Facebook
yeah,
group.
great.
What's the rest of the day looking like for you?
It's now 5 p.m. We are apparently allowed to leave our villas, so I'm going to take our dogs for a walk. We live in the paddy fields just outside of Canggu in Bali, so I think I'm just going to take the dogs for a walk and enjoying being outside. Take some fresh air.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was really nice. I guess we stay in touch. Yeah. And thank you again for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's conversation. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the key insights that we shared on this podcast interview. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you didn't subscribe yet, and head to my website, thebodyandmindcoach.com/blog, to find exclusive articles about various personal and professional development topics. And finally, if you are an athlete or a business professional who's looking for help to advance your career and navigate through whatever challenges that you may be facing to win your game, or if you are a corporate organization who would like to offer their team a workplace well-being workshop, or if you are a sports team who's looking at unlocking their full potential, go to my website, thebodyandmindcoach.com, scroll to the bottom and hit the contact button and reach out. Thank you and enjoy your day.